Good evening, boils and ghouls. It's me, your old pal, the Collector, creeping it real for another Friday night, Fable Fright. And tonight, we dive back into Night Frights by J.B. Stamper, published in 1992 by Scholastic, and contains 13 scary stories. And I must admit, tonight's tale is rather... well, you'll see. So let's stop the small talk and get into Mysterious Visitor. Shall we begin? Amy's eyes wandered from her book to look out the high windows of the living room. Nothing was there, just snowflakes lightly falling through the sky. Still, Amy shivered. She felt uneasy and a little scared, all alone in the Morgans' big house. Little Isabel, the baby, was sound asleep in her nursery upstairs. Amy almost wished the baby would wake up. At least there would be human sounds in the house to keep her company. Amy tried to keep her attention on the history book she was reading. Her teacher had warned the class that there might be a quiz on Monday morning. Oh dear. But it was difficult to concentrate, and Amy's eyes kept wandering off the page to look out into the dark night. She must have gone into a daze, staring out the window at the lightly falling snowflakes, because suddenly, every muscle in her body jumped when she heard the sound of the front door opening. Amy listened to the click of the latch, and then the slight creak of the heavy door as it moved. She even felt a cold draft move through the living room just as she heard the door shut again. "Mrs. Morgan," she called out in a frightened voice. "Mr. Morgan?" There was no answer, only a dead silence in the big house. Amy felt her heart begin to pound. Could it have been the wind that pushed the door open and closed? Or had someone come into the house? Amy shrank into a ball on the couch. She was suddenly afraid to move. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps were moving across the hallway toward the staircase. Who is it?" Amy called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only the sound of the footsteps slowly climbing the stairs to the second floor. Amy was so afraid now that she felt sick. She sat on the couch listening to the footsteps clump up one step after another, higher and higher on the staircase. Then, suddenly, through the panic clogging her mind, she remembered the baby, Isabel. Amy knew she couldn't just hide from the footsteps. She had to make sure the baby was all right. Standing up on trembling legs, Amy began to creep quietly across the living room toward the hallway. Just as she peeked around the corner of the doorway, she heard the footsteps reach the top of the stairs and begin to move across the upstairs floor. Then they stopped. Amy froze where she stood. Terrible thoughts flew through her mind. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to go up and check on Isabel. Amy pushed the thought of the footsteps out of her mind and raced up the staircase as fast as she could climb the steps. Her heart was pounding, and her breath was coming in short gasps. By the time she got to the top, several lights were turned on in the hallway, and Amy searched every doorway and corner, but she saw no one there. Quickly, she dashed to the doorway of Isabel's room. She flicked on the light and looked around. The room was empty except for the baby, and she was cuddled in one corner of her crib, sound asleep. Amy strained her ears. There was no sound, except for Isabel's light breathing. No footsteps, no hints of danger. For a second, Amy wondered if it had all been her imagination. Had she really heard the door open? Had she really heard the footsteps on the stairs? Maybe she had fallen asleep, and it had been part of a bad dream. Amy looked at the baby one more time, and then turned off the light. She tried to walk slowly down the hallway to the stairs, but halfway there, she began to run. And she scrambled down the stairs so fast that she almost fell. Finally, she ran into the living room and jumped back onto the sofa, curling her feet under her. She felt as though she'd just had a terrible nightmare. But now, it was over. With trembling hands, Amy picked up her book again. But a second later, she heard the sound of the footsteps. They were coming back down the stairs. Clump, clump, clump. Amy wanted to scream out, but her throat had gone dry and tight. She listened to the footsteps get louder and louder as they came closer and closer to the hallway. In horror, she turned to look through the doorway to the staircase. The footsteps sounded as if they had just reached the bottom of the steps and were coming across the hallway toward her. But she could see nothing. Nothing at all. Amy fixed her eyes on that terrifying, empty space where the footsteps had stopped, just at the doorway to the living room where she sat. For several agonizing moments, there was silence. Then, the footsteps turned away and walked toward the front door. The door latch clicked and, once again, the solid wooden door swung open. Amy heard the heavy footsteps walk outside. Then the door shut, and the house was filled with silence. Slowly, Amy stood up and began to walk toward the front door. She walked over to the place at the doorway where the footsteps had waited. Then she went to the front door and slowly, carefully opened it. The snow was swirling down in big, thick flakes now. Amy looked down at the sidewalk. In the snow, she saw large, deep footprints walking away from the house. Now I know all of you, my dear Fright followers, are clever little critters, but do your old pal a favor, won't you? If you ever are home alone, watching another episode of the Collector's Friday Night Fable Frights, and you hear the front door open and heavy footsteps clomping around that don't belong to anyone you know, call the police. I know you all have a mobile, cellular, smart thingamabob on you these days, alright? Got it? Good. Now, creeps and freaks, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and ring that little bell icon to be notified of my next visit into your nightmares. You can always follow me on Instagram at OldPalCollector for more Old Pal goodness. And until we shriek again, good night out there, whatever you are.